Welcome to another Texas in Conversation. I'm MARYAH Merchant and I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Distribution at Texas. We're increasingly hearing of distributors and retailers utilizing digital twin technology. Analyst firm Gartner listed digital supply chain twin as one of 2022's supply chain technology themes. So today we'll be talking with three subject matter experts to discuss the topic of a digital twin in the world of supply chain. I am very happy to introduce Joe Vernon, a principal business consultant from EPAM Systems, focused on the adoption of emerging technologies with a special interest in digital twins. Mark DELANEY, VP of Industry Strategy, Retail and CPG at FourKites, who's widely regarded as a leading technology futurist with expert knowledge of the retail technology ecosystem, and Ram Gopalakrishnan, CEO at Bricks, a passionate entrepreneur solving supply chain problems for the most complex retail supply chains, third-party logistics providers, and new-age digital commerce companies. In this conversation, we'll examine the concept of digital twinning, how it works, and the impact it can have on a supply chain in distribution and retail, and how it can improve operations and increase productivity. So let's get started. My first question, and I'll direct this to you, Joe, is what is a digital twin and how does it work?
Thank you, MARYAH, and thank you all. Digital twins. We've been living in a world of transactional data and some unstructured data like weather data, etc. But digital twin, if you've got enough sensor data, data points, physical characteristics, what you're trying to do is to create a mirror of reality. And that reality can be a process flow, a piece of machinery, a network, a distribution center, a city. So a digital twin is a real broad set of data, more data than we've ever used before. And you take that and you model it. It's really quite an innovation. But its foundation is you're using more data points and richer data sets than you ever have in the past. And that really describes a digital twin.
Yeah. And it's exciting because, I mean, we've talked about this before, Joe. It's not a new concept, but it's certainly, quite innovative now. And it's kind of like the old concept, but on steroids.
Yeah, I think we found a way to put it to use for business, right? So it's been around longer. But the real thing is making these tangible business cases with it. And so in manufacturing, when you digitally twin a piece of equipment or production line and you're able to simulate it and improve its predictive maintenance and its uptime, that's a very straightforward business case. And I think that's one of the most foundational ones that really helped digital twin take off. And now we're seeing it in supply chain.
So, Ram, this question is for you. Is this new technology or just a new buzzword? What's all the hype around it?
Yeah, like Joe mentioned, I don't think the technology per se is new. I have read in places that NASA has used this technology 50 years back. And in terms of, this being a buzzword, I think it becomes more of a buzzword because now, every other person that's a technologist is getting to actually practice it. And there's a wide adoption in a variety of different industries. And all of this is because the technology that supports all of this is becoming more affordable. And that's why there's a lot of practical use cases that are being addressed by digital twin as a concept.
And this question is for everyone. I mean, are there any particular industries that are utilizing digital twins more than others? I mean, can you talk a bit about use cases?
Sure. Now, Ram mentioned NASA. And so the aerospace has been very widely adopted. Boeing CEO even claimed this was the digital twin era of aerospace. So, and this was several years ago. So they took a very aggressive program to digitally twin all their parts and to help with rapid prototyping. And automotive has followed that, and other folks that are very heavy manufacturing focused with lots of components. I think aerospace really took the lead on it, but it's getting wider adoption now.
And I would just add, I think the elephant in the room, right, is what we've been going through for the last 2.5 years, right? So no one could go out there and predict, right, a global pandemic by any stretch. But I think now that's probably put more focus on being able to do scenario planning without having to physically make changes. So if you think about supply chain, for example, now you can look at changing ports or changing modes of transport in a digital world, right, without actually creating the disruption to your supply chain that you would in your sort of everyday world. So I think that's what's driving a lot of sort of increased attention of late.
And to close that out, I mean, today I think there's a lot of use cases, everything from the hospital all the way up to providers that move product across the globe, identifying all of the delays as well as kind of the causes for the delays and resolution paths. So there's a lot of practical applications these days.
Yeah, definitely. And Joe, because I know this whole digital twin concept is close to your heart, how do you see it impacting these industries that we've just talked about?
So it's been very helpful. It's had a big impact, first of all, with these very sort of straightforward use cases around predictive maintenance and uptime and trying to predict disruption. And Mark hit on it. You take that trying to predict disruption on a machine's runtime and you extend that to a supply chain or a cargo ship headed to a port. All these use cases all fit the digital twin paradigm. So the adoption around it is pretty straightforward when you talk about risk, resilience, and what we're talking about really, if you roll it all up, is predictive analytics. You're just trying to be a better predictor of some outcome that's in the future, and digital twin is driving a lot of that. And so you see it across basically every sector. Ram mentioned life science, healthcare, manufacturing, chemical processing, oil and gas. It's everywhere. It's just waiting for people to have the energy to adopt it, and they can find a use case.
And when we look on the retail side, Mark, like what are you seeing and hearing in that space?
Well, I mean, I think right now, especially driven by the labor shortage that we're experiencing, there's a lot of work going on around automation, right? So I think the really exciting thing about digital twins is that you can now start to do some what if scenarios as you start to introduce automation into the process, right? So instead of going out sort of to the field and doing something that's going to cause a lot of disruption potentially, you can sort of, simulate that disruption, right, in a very controlled environment and make sure that you have it absolutely right before you deploy it. So I think for retail, especially as everyone now is, opened back up and they've sort of, taken a deep breath, right, from all the change that's going on the last couple of years, certainly automation is the way of the future, right? So they need to try to figure out, okay, how much automation is right? Where do I deploy it? And how is that going to impact my staff and my customers? And if I can do that in a virtual environment without actually going out and, annoying staff, annoying customers, whatever the case may be, that's a really exciting opportunity.
So Joe, what's the investment in terms of both costs and resources?
That's an interesting question. I'll just take how most people get started, at least in my experience, and they start with a proof of concept or a minimal viable product and a rapid prototyping of what the twin will do for them. And that's typically pretty low investment because the consultants that are helping them and the digital twin partner environment they're bringing forward is trying to prove to the customer that there's a use case, that there's something tangible here. If you look at what NVIDIA did at BMW, that's a whole nother scale of a digital twin project because they completely twinned their manufacturing facility. So you can just kind of go by scope and imagine that's multi-million dollars, a large scale project to do what NVIDIA did with BMW. But of course, it has large impact with lots of use cases and what they were trying to accomplish. So the range is pretty wide. But I'll say that the getting starting point, because of the providers out there that are trying to get in there and prove to you how to use it, is pretty low. And small teams of just 3 to 5 people with getting some data on their hands and some modeling tools and a couple people on the business side can prove how the twin can work. And that's been very good for adoption.
That's very helpful. And if I were to ask the consultants in the room, when and where should a distributor start this process? What would be your thoughts around that?
So first, from elaborating on some of the things that Mark and Joe said, one of the key things for people to realize is there's a difference between just a digital simulation and a digital twin. Simulation is just running a lot of the what-if scenarios. But in a digital twin, you also bring a lot of the reality into the equation, right? So hypothetically, if, I am a distributor that, say, for example, services, candy and chocolates, and I have a shipment coming in, and, it requires, say, ice packs or gel packs to keep the product cold, but I have a sensor on the truck and that tells me that the temperature has gone to a certain level where I can anticipate some damage or melting of the product. So I can plug that into the equation as I look at my distribution, so I can make decisions on what I want to do with the amount of product that I have and the people that are looking for that product. So there's a lot of very practical applications to plugging in all of that data. And in terms of kind of where to start, I think Joe mentioned it earlier. I think a pilot exercise is always kind of the starting point. Because there's so much of practical applications, but also it's a pretty disciplined exercise that requires a lot of good quality data and collaboration across the different technologies where the data sits. So a good starting point is an assessment of the right amount of data and the type of data for the problem that you're trying to solve. Joe?
No, that's right. That's right. And the other thing is the education that comes with it. So with machine learning or any of these advanced technologies, you want the client or the customer to be there for the knowledge journey. And these pilots, like Ram said, with a pretty well understood problem set you're trying to resolve for, and just take your time introducing the technology and the capability so there's a lot of comprehension, so that you can, once you learn the lessons from that POC, go forward and do many more use cases.
And I think probably just to add on to that a little bit, don't go into it with sort of pre-built conclusions, right? Try to go into it, and it's hard, right? We're all human, right? But try to go into it with as open a mind as possible, because you never know what is going to come out of it. And you have to be willing to sort of take those results and run with them. Don't necessarily just use it as a, hey, this is just going to sort of confirm what I think I already know. Right? It really should be viewed as an exercise in almost academia, and you have to be willing to, live with the results that come out of it or take action based upon the results that come out of it.
Yeah, so tell me what I don't know is more the approach.
Right. Yep.
So, we've got all of you experts in the room. So tell us, how should distributors assess their ROI after digital twinning? Is there a formula? How should they go about doing that?
For me, what I've seen as a first step for digital twinning for a distributor, and Mark can give a lot of good advice on the network optimization. I'll start with inside the four walls, which is labor optimization. And knowing how my operation runs, my process flows, my equipment run times, and my labor rates, you can simulate what it's going to be like tomorrow and know what your labor demands are. And that's very helpful. And not just that, if you run your simulation in parallel with reality, which is what makes digital twin a wonderful tool, you can run it in parallel. You can push it forward a couple hours and say, what is it going to be like at the end of the shift? And if it says you're going to be 15% behind in some picking area, you can adjust your labor proactively. That's what we've been looking for in distribution forever. Doing it on spreadsheets, and knocking our heads against the wall. So now we can simulate and say those 100,000 web orders that are going to come down at 4 o'clock because, people love to drop those at the end of the shift. Can we actually get them out? Yeah, let's simulate that and see if that means an hour of overtime. And let's optimize that to save labor. So that for me is one of the first use cases that is already getting some success.
Yeah, I think the Yeah, I would say the labor savings certainly big. I would say just it all sort of backs up to retail at some point because you're talking about customer satisfaction and things like that. So if you think about a supply chain on the surface, it seems very simple, right? But we all know very well that it's not that simple at all. But what you're really trying to do, and this is where I think the digital twin concept will really start to take off, is you want to avoid what happens these days, which is if you're a home improvement retailer, you have to put snow blowers into the stores in August because of the way your supply chain works. Well, that's not a good use of working capital. It's not a good use for the stores. It's not so if you can simulate that supply chain from the point of manufacturer all the way till it gets to the store and do that what if scenario planning that Joe and Ram were talking about, then now you can get this sort of orchestration going on, which is sort of the holy grail of supply chain, that you have goods and services arriving to retail at exactly the time the customers want to buy them. Now, we're certainly not there yet, and we're not going to get there anytime soon, but that's where digital twins could play a huge role, in my opinion.
So from a ROI standpoint, I look at it, both in the form of soft benefits and tangible numeric benefits. Just like Mark mentioned, I think having the right information handy at the right time makes a world of difference in terms of customer satisfaction. So that is definitely one of the things that we are seeing a lot of our customers at least exploring the option to understand how they can provide much better customer service. And also in the form of tangible benefits, I think, it is helping people make a lot of decisions, particularly like, when you think about periods of time where there is a lot of unknown. Whether it is, like a fast fashion or fashion retailer that has a 6-week time window for the product to go through the full life cycle, or even during the peak situation where, the amount of labor that you need drastically depends on what happens right about at that time. So for situations where there is a lot of impact based on real life happenings or real life events, those are situations where having the right simulation model as well as having the right digital twin will result in a lot of very tangible numeric benefits in the ROI. However, I think it is quite a disciplined investment, and the returns are going to be truly dependent on the data that you work with and the commitment to the process. This is not a one-time system implementation and done. This is an exercise that you continue to evolve over a period of time.
And I think that's the interesting part. I remember, Joe, when we were talking, you had mentioned that it's a continuous process and it's constant tweaking, and I think that's one of the coolest things about this technology.
Yeah, if you start inside of a building, that's great. But then you go to another building. Well, now both those are twinned. Now those twins can talk to each other. Now you start getting to Mark's territory of network optimization. Now you have all these buildings that you can simulate, the network, the supply, the demand. It gets very exciting as you connect all this together. You just keep going from a core and building outwards. And really get to know your supply chain a lot better. That's really what it does for you. Get to know yourself better because it's that mirror of reality.
So Ram, based on your experience, what do you see as the biggest barrier for distributors in this area, and how can they overcome it?
In a lot of cases, I think the biggest barrier is quality data, right? I think, if I take one step back, I think, one of the biggest barriers is kind of the fundamental understanding of what a digital twin represents and what it can provide in terms of value proposition. And when, adopters or potential adopters of this technology are past that point, then the biggest barrier at that point is data. Typically, in a lot of scenarios, what we encounter is, a lot of the retailers or distributors having their data reside across multiple different technology, multiple different architecture. A lot of them are just about, beginning the process of standardizing, a lot of their data on a data lake. Yeah, a lot of them are going through that process of evolution. Now people understand the value of having the right quality of data. And when they kind of get past that point and have the data readily available, at that point, it is, basically the determination of where the biggest bang for their buck is. Because at any point when you look at the multiple layers, that represent the digital twin, that is a replica of the physical setup, identifying the key areas, because it's definitely not going to be a big bang. It's got to be methodical and identifying the key areas where you continue to derive value that will motivate you to continue the investments.
With a tool like Digital Twin, you really become a data-enabled driven organization. There's no looking back. And you've got to have the structure, like Ram said, of a data platform, a way to move data in and out. You need an AI ML workbench. You need these components to drive the twin. Tools to visualize what the twin the output of the twin. The real timeness across how you think about things. If you're going to run simulations and they give you an answer in 30 seconds, do you have the ability to respond to an answer in 30 seconds and do something tangible with it? That's a new paradigm. And so you've got to build yourself into that kind of data-enabled, innovative, pushing forward. You shut some doors behind you, right? And you say, we're going to go here. We're going to use this twinning capability to really make ourselves a sort of a new organization from an efficiency and all kinds of aspects.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get the data right, then I think one of the things you want to make sure is that you don't do this kind of work in a bubble, right? Don't make it just part, of, one department somewhere down the hall is doing this. I'm not really sure what those people do, but they come up with some really cool stuff, right? You have to make sure that, to Joe's point, close those doors behind you and say, okay, we're making a commitment going forward. We're going to do this, right? We're going to live with the results that come out of it. And then we're going to spread it across the organization. And once the entire organization is on board, then you get the usage and adoption that you've been looking for.
So what's next for digital twin technology? I mean, Joe, how do you see it evolving?
Well, I think some big customers, some folks that are using digital twin at scale are helping spawn ideas. So Tesla digitally twins all their cars, and they do it for customer service because all these cars have a lot of software in them. And so they want to know your driving habits, how your car's running, and how often they should update your software. So don't just push to everybody the same update, make it specific. That gets people thinking, okay, I can now get down to the individual because if I can twin them. Amazon has twinned their customer base. So they can look at their customers as an ecosystem out there, and they can do things against it and see how they respond. So that kind of leadership helps other retailers and automobile companies get ideas and be fast followers. So I think there'll be a lot of fast followers about the use cases that are already working. And then others will push into a little bit more into the unknown. There's some exciting stuff trying to get traction in retail about watching people move through stores, personalize the store experience. That's a hot area. I haven't seen, maybe one of these gentlemen have. I've not seen anything come out of that that's really said, hey, here's what you need to do. But they're pushing in that retail, that metaverse world of bringing digital things to life, thinking in a 3D thinking about 3D digital. That's exciting. But the practical stuff, like on factory floor and all that, they'll be fast followers to that. So there's sort of really two things going on at the same time.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the store optimization piece, right? Because this is exactly the time going into NRF or coming out of NRF that, retailers are talking about store of the future, right? What does that store look like? Because there's no doubt that we've changed permanently as shoppers, right? We're not going to go back to what we were doing 3 years ago. That's just, that ship has sailed. But there is a lot of scenario planning going on right now too. Does the store look like a distribution center? Does the store look more experiential? So there are some retailers already starting to look at that, and digital twins are certainly part of that, to be able to say, hey, if I were to sort of reskin my stores and they were going to look like this, and they were going to have this percentage actually dedicated to selling space versus more sort of, pack and pick in the back of the store, right? Then you can do that what if scenario planning in a safer environment before you go out there and disrupt the stores and disrupt the staff and customers. So I think that's an outstanding example.
So from my perspective, one of the next stages of evolution is going to be tied to what I call the shared economy. And essentially, there was a point in time where the physical distribution network was just, siloed to individual retailers. And today we're getting to the point where it is becoming more of a shared infrastructure, right? As people adopt that kind of practice, I feel like there's going to be a similar trend digitally where, just like Joe mentioned, individual digital twins collaborating so that there's economies of scale, and there's a lot of benefits both from the standpoint of being green, sustainable, as well as creating a lot of optimization and value, not only for the retailers, but also for the customers.
Okay, so the last question for the day for every one of you. What is the one piece of advice that you can give a mid-market to large distributor who wants to improve their supply chain operations leveraging digital twins? So why don't we start with you, Ram?
So first and foremost, I always kind of go back to the data, right? Stage one is making sure you have a game plan or a strategy for how you want to bring your data together, and subsequently establish like a crawl, walk, run game plan that'll help you go through the different stages in concrete steps so you can prove the viability and the value. It's not a one large scale exercise, it's multiple small exercises that get you to the finish line.
How about you, Mark?
Well, yeah, just, same sort of sentiment, right? I mean, I think you have to set realistic milestones, right? That's number one, right? You can't rush something like this, but yet you still have to have some boundaries around it. And then I would just say over communicate, right? Don't make it a science project. Don't make it something that one part of the organization works on sort of, in secret, right? Make sure that you're communicating to the entire organization why you're going down this path, right? The Tesla example is great. I never even thought of that, but that makes perfect sense, right? Because it's a very complicated automobile, right? There's a lot of software involved. So, digital twin of a car makes sense. Digital twin of a store makes sense. And then certainly in my world, digital twin of your supply chain makes a lot of sense because you can make changes to that supply chain on the fly without creating breakages and the linkages and things like that. So a lot of great examples, but I do think over communicating is the key to make sure the entire organization is on board.
And Joe?
Those are two great answers, actually. And so playing on top of those is really get started. Start educating yourself and start experimenting. Make your experiments cost contained. It'll be very exciting at first. You might want to rush in a little heavily. Lessons learned from big data and other things, start small with something you can grasp as your organization and your team can grasp, and just start educating and experimenting. Because this is one of those technologies that is we think is going to be foundational. It has that feel. AI has been called the new electricity. I don't know what I'd call digital twin, but it's got that foundational feel to it. So getting in there and getting started is my best advice.
That's great. So I got the 3 nuggets for our audience today, which is data integrity, setting realistic milestones and over communicating, and experimenting and educating. So Joe, Mark, Ram, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your insights with us. And thank you to the viewers. If you need support with introducing technology and strategies within your platform, Texas is here to help. At the end of this video, you have the option to speak to one of our supply chain experts or you can access our Digital Twin 101 infographic. Thank you so much for watching.